Alright, time for another draft science video presentation. Yeah, performance issue. Anyway, I'll get to a couple of comments because there's always something useful in them. I mean, there's words, and some of the words are useful words like kinetic energy or pure force or gravity, and so I can always make something out of a comment. Even if it's not entirely on the subject or not entirely correct or not entirely useful. But anyway, sorry. So I did think of another analogy, real world, another example of where I think it's obvious that the kinetic energy theory fails. Okay, it just doesn't work. Because if it did work, the world would be a different place. They do things differently. And they don't do them that way, so it sort of means it must not work. So water is interesting because it's non-compressible. The idea of the hydroelectric, as I was pointing out before, is just the idea that you have water at a certain height, and you're just taking advantage of now it has weight because gravity acts on it. So gravity acts on it, that gives it weight. So now it has lbs. Pounds of weight, and then you can take that water and drop it a distance. The measured distance would increase its weight. Okay, so the further away from, the longer, the more in the gravity the water is, before you get to your turbine-y thing, the water molecules, the mass is. And then you can spin this little wheel, and you can make, with your motor, and you can make, electricity, energy. You can get the energy out of the water by taking away its velocity, using its velocity to turn something else. So the traditional water wheel worked on this principle. And yeah, there's lots of improvements you can make to a water wheel, like cupping the little things, doing different things that prevent the water from not only from escaping, missing the paddle and reflecting off the paddle, and doing all kinds of things that'll waste the energy. So you can make it more efficient. But there's no evidence that people took streams and thought, hey, if we take a big stream and we turn it into a little stream, okay, that somehow will increase the amount of energy. Like I said, you can make it so it works on your water wheel, so the water gets to your wheel. You can, sluice the water into a finer and finer path, to get it to hit just the surface you want to hit. But it doesn't give you these huge increases, by changing the size of the pipe. So the idea is that I could make this pipe really big, go into the turbine, or I can make it very small. Now if I make the pipe small, I end up with high pressure. And if I make it big, I end up with low pressure and low velocity. So this is, small velocity. I don't know, something like this. Yeah, so small velocity, and this would be big velocity. I think arrows up and down would be better. So big velocity here, small velocity here. With big pipe versus little pipe. And what's happening in the pipe is what I drew over here. Okay, so you can sort of, this was never explained to me, in terms of, they didn't really go into this stuff in school, this kind of detail. But what happens when you, change the nozzle, when you create a nozzle for water? You clearly increase the velocity, so you end up with a larger velocity arrow. But how are you doing that? What's the price you're paying? Well, the price you're paying is sort of like the train analogy. You're taking a big mass going slow, okay, and you're turning into a much smaller mass going fast. So you're just doing the big M, little v, and you're converting it into little m, big V. And there's just a straightforward conversion. You're just taking 1,000, water molecules moving a slow speed and turning it into 500 that's moving the faster speed, if you're doing a 50% reduction. And what's really happening is you're just, this water molecule, say it's going 30 miles an hour, it gives this one 60 miles an hour. So it takes the one next to it that's going 30 and it gives it the 60. And this one stops moving. And this one stops moving. So they stop moving. They lose their velocity, give it to the other water molecules to get through the pipe. So that's what's really happening is you're just taking energy that already exists, an arrow, you know, with a length, and you're giving it to the other object and creating an arrow with a length. And there's no squaring. There's no idea that because now that this one's going 60, that I created more energy. So they don't sit there at the Hoover Dam or something, and they don't sit there and bother reducing this and reducing it and reducing and trying to make little tiny jets going very, very fast to hit the turbine. They know this is all they got. All they got is a certain weight of water, and all they can do is try to most efficiently make that weight hit their turbine paddles. And that's all they got. They don't have anything else. There's no way to take this number of m's, okay, and their velocity from gravity and turn it into anything else. There's no way to, you know, square it. There's no way to make this MV any more powerful by giving it more velocity. More velocity won't give the water more power. It doesn't work. And so just like the train analogy, you have the 5-ton train, okay, going 10 miles an hour versus, you know, the 10-ton train going 5 velocity. Yeah, got that right. So they say because they're squaring this velocity that this train has twice as much energy. This water, okay, the water you've reduced 50% and made it go twice as fast through a nozzle does not have twice as much energy. Because if it did, that's what they would do. They would take the water from the Hoover Dam, whatever the lake is called, I can't remember, Hoover Lake, you know, the reservoir isn't very big, you know. All this complaint about stuff sometimes, and you wonder why all the complaining about creating this thing, because it doesn't take up all that much space. It's not like 10 zillion people had to be displaced. You know, it's not that big a reservoir. Anyway, no, it's not. Anyway, so you're just, it doesn't work. So you could just argue that water is sort of a proof. Okay, when I put a hose onto my, you know, house water, you know, coming out of a nozzle that big, and I reduce it to come out a little tinier hole and give it much more velocity so it can shoot further directions, yeah, I have less mass that can go further, but I don't have any more energy because all the energy I now have, I got from other pieces of matter I'm not shooting anymore. They don't have any, they're not going to hit anything. They're not doing anything anymore. They're dead here. They're stuck with no movement. Okay, they're dead water. Because they gave their energy to another water molecule that is going. So I didn't make more things with energy. I'm making actually less things with energy. I've just given each little bit more energy, but I haven't created more total energy because I gave the water velocity. It doesn't have any more ability to do real work. It's not going to move more atoms. It's not going to do any of that stuff. All I've done is changed, you know, pounds per square inch. You know, instead of hitting a 2-inch surface, I'm hitting a 1-inch surface. It's not more energy, it's just less. You know, it's just in a different arrangement. So all you're doing is changing the arrangement of the energy, but this train and this train have the same energy. There's no difference in their energies. There's no difference in their ability to do work. And the same, like I said, you can just logically understand it from the water example that no one believes, I don't think, okay, that because you're making the hose nozzle, you're turning it, cranking it, that somehow you're making energy. I'm making energy by making the hole smaller the water comes out of. they really don't think they're making more energy, that they've converted the water pressure into some new thing. They're just converting the energy. They're taking the light, okay, that's going everywhere, and they're taking a parabolic mirror and they're focusing it. So they're just taking energy that already exists and they're just focusing it, in a sense. They're just creating a mechanism that converts the energy into a mode that allows them to shoot it further. That's it. But it's not totally more energy. So I think people could understand that this is sort of the logical proof. That I don't think any of you people will actually argue that if they do the turbine thing by doing this reductionism, you know, if they just keep reducing how small a pipe the water's going through, that they make the turbine, you know, many times more capable of extracting the electricity. I don't think any of you believe that's what happens at hydroelectric plants. It's just about the pressure. It's just about the weight of the water, and you don't have anything else. And there's just no point in making your pipe smaller and smaller. And, you know, we never hear them, oh, we have to make the blades out of super hard blah, 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 because we're hitting it with a super high velocity water stream and all that stuff. It's not like it's some sort of airplane engine. No, it's not. Don't get me wrong, they want to get them up to speed, so don't get, you know, the engines, the generators become more efficient if you can get them going faster, but that just has to do with bearings and how they work, and they're better, the faster you're going, the better the bearings get, so you can reduce a lot of friction in a system by getting it up to a certain rotational speed. It creates more symmetry, and it doesn't vibrate or wobble as much. So there's reasons why they want to get it up to speed, but it's not have anything to do with multiplying the energy. Okay. Getting twice as much energy for free, so to speak. You know, just by putting a reducer on the pipe. Yeah, so that's probably enough. You know, no point in doing anything but putting the water in front of you and see if you will lap any of it up. But I'm arguing that's a logical argument. It's just another piece of logic that says there's got to be something wrong with the kinetic energy theory. So it really doesn't work in the real world. Alright, so this V guy added a little bit on adding force to an object that already has velocity. Okay. So this is the silly part where I'm explaining how, say if a bullet's flying through space and I create an explosion, just like a regular bullet explosion, you know, behind the bullet. So it just passes and boom, I explode something. The energy I get out of the explosion will now be magnified many times. If the bullet's going really fast, I'm going to add, you know, the difference between 1,000 and 100,000, you know, 100 times more energy, because it's already moving. And I'm going to take advantage of that square thing, you know, where it just gets bigger, you know, it magnifies exponentially the squaring. So if I can give something a pre-velocity going in, I'll get so much more out of it. And the same argument would be made for gravity or anything else, that any force, I can make the force have a much higher magnitude by just moving the thing before I brought it, you know, so something falling in gravity can only attain so much energy, but if I give it velocity before it gets into gravity, somehow the gravity will have so much more of an effect in terms of creating energy. And I think you kind of you should be able to understand that doesn't make any sense either. So anyway, that's what this is a response to. As you've already pointed out, getting something moving takes aligning all of the little bits in the same direction. Well, obviously getting it moving just requires a tiny bias. All right, so there's a tiny bias in gravity, you know, created by the gigantic Earth. So the gigantic Earth absorbs some of the energy coming from the universe. The universe is pushing into the Earth on all sides, and by going through the Earth, the energy has to move atoms It has to move electrons specifically and protons. And in the process of moving them around, it's not going the speed of light anymore because pushing requires it to go slower. So it loses a little bit coming out the other side. There's not as much energy coming out the other side because the energy got used moving electrons and protons. And so the Earth is radiating less, is coming out of the Earth than went into the Earth. I mean, you can sort of understand where does the energy go, right? I mean, every day the universe is throwing stuff at the Earth, and you kind of know that it must be at equilibrium because it's not making stuff, you know, it's not making something, you know, it's not building something with all that stuff coming in. It's not making the Earth more dense. It's not compressing it. It's not doing anything else. So all that energy must be going back out again. But the trick is all of it isn't going back out again because some of it got used up, delaying, slowing the force down. And so less is coming out. And that's why we're falling gravity is not because gravity is an aggressive force. It's because gravity is essentially created by the dull force coming out of the Earth. So it's the absence of the balancing force that makes us fall into gravity. It's not because gravity has power. It's because the Earth made this way weak. You know, this way has gotten weakened by the Earth, and so this way is stronger. Absorbing energy. So gravity is a consequence of the absorption of the energy of the universe by slowing speed of light force down a bit, pushing electrons and protons at much slower speeds. Okay, moving takes aligning. So the alignment issue is that the inside of you is a bunch of compass needles, like a magnet. Okay, you could sort of understand that each nuclei contains an element that has momentum in a direction. It tends to go in a direction because of the configuration of the helium nuclei. And what you're basically doing is when they're all random, then everything just tugs in all directions and things go nowhere. But if you can orient a few of these nuclei in one direction, then that one direction will make it move in that direction. So you can make it a little bit magnetic, a little more magnetic, a little more magnetic. So it's just changing the domains. It's like making more of the nuclei point in a direction. So that's what happens to you when you're exposed to an imbalance in the force, is that it changes the orientation of some of your nuclei in the direction of the force's movement. So if you get hit with a little extra force in a direction, it changes the orientation of a few extra helium nuclei inside the atoms, and they start pointing more in one direction than in other directions, and that bias moves you. So you can imagine that adding force to something that already has velocity is less force spent on the alignment part. So I've made exactly the opposite argument. So that's my only critique here, is that you're saying that we're agreeing when we're disagreeing. So I just make the point again that just like with the water, in a sense, once you've used water molecules, you know, once they've given their energy to another water molecule, they're dead, and you know they're just going to absorb somebody else's momentum, but they can't give anybody momentum because they already gave it to something else to make it go the 60 miles an hour instead of the 30 miles an hour. And as you start changing, so you know, a metaphor, we'll just do this little thing. So this is the argument. This is what nuclei are doing, right? They're just pointed in directions, okay? They're just like little arrows. They go in these different directions. That's what makes everything Brownian motion. Everything's jittering because every piece of an atom has got a little bit of a bias in it, but altogether the atoms don't, you know, the bias adds up to nothing. And all you're really saying is that as I add a force, you know, I put a rain hits it, the wind blows, and the wind turns the sails, okay? And so now you end up with more of these kind of things. Now the trick is, as I start converting them, I can't convert them twice, okay? So I can't make them double arrows. So as I gain velocity, as I start going faster and faster, and more of these things are going in this direction, and none are going in these other directions, it gets harder and harder for the wind to convert them. These get rarer and rarer, and most of the force misses. You can't hit one that needs changing. So your force gets less effective, not more effective, because the only ones that matter are these. The only ones that matter are the ones not going, not lined up. And those get harder and harder to hit, okay, as a percentage. As you start changing, all the other ones are getting changed. I'm just saying your force ends up taking a long time before it hits one, a longer time before it can hit one that needs fixing, that's not blowing in the right, that's not configured in the right direction. So it becomes harder to push. Now, that's the same argument as a kind of an Einstein argument about how things are getting heavier. They're not really getting heavier, they're getting more and more transparent, is my argument. The faster you're going, the more transparent you are. If I move this little chalk holder, if I move it away from you at the speed of light, it's invisible. Right? It just becomes invisible. You can't see it anymore. It's invisible, because nothing can reflect off of it. And the opposite argument, I move it towards you at the speed of light, it becomes incredibly visible, because when it gets to you, it's going to have a whole bunch of built-up energy ready to reflect back at you, going the speed of light. Everything from here to here, okay, all of the energy in that space will reflect back to you at the same moment, making this impact be very severe. Just a fact. That's why it's good matter can't go the speed of light, because if matter did, it would be shooting photons at us, that would be more destructive than the actual matter of the object. But anyway, it'd be collecting them the whole time it's traveling through space. If real matter could travel the speed of light, it would collect photons. Collect. It would collect them. They all have to reflect, you see, at the same time. The one here, and the one here, and the one here I hit. They'll end up all coming to you at exactly the same moment. So I'll be collecting every bit of energy. So if something was, a trillion light years away, and a piece of matter, and it was moving as fast as the speed of light, or close to it, or even half of it, it would be collecting a lot of energy to hit you with. Essentially, it would condense the energy. It would multiply. Well, half the speed of light would be half the energy, so it would be giving you a burst that would be twice as bright as the burst you should have gotten. But like I say, if you get close to the speed of light, then you're talking about every single piece of photonic energy it hits through its whole trillion-mile path would end up coming to you at the same instant in time. Very bright light. Anyway. But that's partly on the subject. Well, anyway, so their kinetic energy theory doesn't even match their Einstein notions that velocity is harder to create. Now, that's because they create a Lorentz transformation and just break everything. So nothing happens here at slow speeds, and everything happens here at the high speeds. So that's the gimmick that they evade. That being consequential is because they pretend it only happens when you get 99% of the speed of light. So there's no effect until you're 99%, because the only part that matters is this up arrow, and this is too flat to matter. Yeah. Enough of that. All right. So you can imagine, that maybe fits in the useful work part of the concept of kinetic energy. So he's sort of pointing out that there's an illusion of the idea that it might be doing more work. But again, I think that illusion has more to do with the fact that people just don't appreciate the huge difference in the amount of surface area you're involving. The reason why a bullet looks like a dramatic amount of energy is because it's hitting a tiny amount of space. And as you just make the bullet bigger and give it less and less velocity, you can understand that yeah, it's just because you've made something that was spread over a huge amount of space. Just you know, you could do this. You could do the needle thing. You know, that you know, I can have a certain amount of pressure to shove a needle into you, and it's a tiny amount of pressure it takes to poke you with the needle. But if I make the needle fatter and fatter, there gets a point where I can't even poke it into you. It won't do anything. You know, it won't have any effect at all. Especially if the total energy I'm using over that larger area is the same amount of energy. It gets pretty dull. All right, that maybe fits the useful word. Okay, and why velocity is more important when it comes to useful work. So that's the, you know, I'm just saying is, you know, these reworking of, you know, perceptual work or seems like work. You know, that might be a better way to say it. It's just when you say useful work, you're implying that there is such a thing as better work, and there's only work. Okay, there's only the amount of water. Pressure, there's only the weight of the water, and yes, you can put the weight in one tiny little space. Okay, you can put all the, I mean, I could take my weight and put it all on top of the top of a pin, and now that pin's going to have incredible penetrating power, right? I mean, my total 150 pounds on top of one little pin, that little pin is going to be able to fly through things pretty dramatically. But there's not more energy. I didn't become more energy because I'm, you know, I've pointed myself into a pin. You know, that doesn't make me more energetic. Making, you know, putting an arrowhead on an arrow is a way of making it more dramatic and more capable of penetrating things and doing work, but, you know, what we call work, but it's really doing the same amount of work. It's just distributing it more efficiently for a particular purpose. You know, our purpose would be penetration, and so that's why, you know, it works. Now, see, that's another argument I could bring up is ballistics and then the archer arrow people, because the arrow people will tell you that this kinetic energy theory really doesn't work. They know that if they go to lighter and lighter arrows, they don't get, you know, in higher velocity, they don't get better penetration. They don't, you know, the arrows bounce off, all kinds of things happen. They don't have, you know, it's not more energy. It's just a different configuration of the energy. Okay. Kind of fits with your gravity idea as well. Well, as I just sort of saying, my gravity idea is exactly the opposite in the sense that the gravity idea essentially implies that also that it's harder to push things once you've already pushed them. The higher velocities are harder to achieve because the force doesn't, it gets harder and harder to make a constructive velocity change. It gets harder and harder to interact with the object. Therefore, it's harder and harder to push it. The object does, in fact, get more and more transparent. And you're shining a light on it and trying to push it with a light, but it's getting more and more transparent the faster you push it. Comes in one side, gets wasted in a way doing a bunch of interactions that have nothing to do with its original velocity, and you have something less energetic, let's use that word, come out the other side. Yes, so he's just rephrasing the gravity argument, which is that the energy is essentially absorbed in the process of creating heat inside the Earth. That is, moving molecules this way and then moving them this way and then moving them this way and then moving them this way and moving them. The constant movement, although the movement doesn't go anywhere, the movement is absorbing energy of the universe because the movements will be slower than the speed of light. So the force has in fact had its kinetic energy reduced, its energy reduced, because you reduced its velocity by forcing it to push something. The pushing means the force can't get where it's going as fast and therefore lost momentum. Let's see, come out the other side. Whether it's actually wasted or just transformed into another form, which isn't able to do what gravity does, is something for another time. Yeah, so it's a little complicated whether you can actually consume the energy because the matter is actually moving. But the trick is that when matter moves, anytime matter moves, it's obviously reflecting a different world, right? I move towards you, I'm making more reflections in the direction that I'm moving. And if I'm, in the other way, I'm reflecting less energy back the other way. So, every time I'm moving, I'm changing the universe. So every time an electron or proton does move, it is putting a different amount of energy into the universe in a direction. It's changing the direction. But I still would argue that I think even if you're going through all the technicalities, it is basically a consumption of energy in the universe, because in fact, if I was to make a box to collect the pressure of the universe, all right, so I'm just going to collect the pressure, that is the stuff hitting the outside of the box. If I put matter in the box and allow the force to get caught pushing the matter, I will reduce the pressure, the absolute pressure of the box, because there will be less interactions with the outside of the box, the inside of the box, by the little bits, because the matter is, in fact, stopping interactions from happening more frequently. They can't happen as frequently because the forces are interacting with the matter, and those interactions are replacing the interactions that would happen when the outside of the box. So the total interactions hitting the box will be less. So you could argue the universe would have less pressure, which would mean it would have less weight and it would have less energy. All right, so you end up with a scenario where gravity coming from the Earth is always a deficit. So gravity isn't the force. Gravity is the product of the force. Okay, the force, the circumstance creates what we call gravity. Okay, but the circumstance is there isn't any such thing. There's just the consumption of energy from the universe. So gravity is really a bad word to use. I mean, it's really a bad, conceptually, it's the wrong way to think about it. Because what it really is the fact that matter moving consumes energy in the universe. Maybe it turns out Leibniz destroyed Einstein's meant space rule before it even existed. I don't really understand how you can compare the two things, but whatever. It's okay with me if you wish to do that. I don't know how one the relativity type arguments. That's the irony. I mean, everybody sort of accepted those. Leibniz, Newton, everybody already knew of Galilean relativity, so they knew that whatever this energy thing was, it might not be possessed exactly in the quantities we understand, because we understand we're moving on a stagecoach in a direction already, and that these motions aren't accounting for the fact that we already have a previous motion. All the bits in this room are all satellites in the universe, and they're all moving around, the gravitational field of the universe, you could argue. Alright, so this SK says, so he's still on the subject of this experiment to crap. Yes, I understand and agree with you about experiments being done professionally, but remember, those professionals would be raised in the same culture as other common folk. So I mean, the point is the culture of science is supposed to be above it. So the very fact that, I understand your argument that science is also full of people who aren't honoring their profession. Okay, it's like the molesting doctor, for example, or the doctor who's ripping his patients off on whatever extra tests, and he's getting a kickback from the MRI guys, and so he sends people to get an MRI. So yeah, he sucks as a doctor. And so there's scientists that are just as corrupt in the fact that they're engineering evidence to fit the story, and they're not really concerned that they're actually engineering the evidence, and they know they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be forcing the experiments to produce the outcome they want. They should be, in fact, very curious if the experiment doesn't work the first time. That should give them some indication that, man, maybe something, maybe we got to look a little deeper. Because I can't, it doesn't work unless I create just the right environment, and then it works. Well, why is that? and they don't ask those kind of questions. So I'm just saying, I'm not even saying that there's, there's a difference between technicians and, so that's the thing, right? I mean, every profession has people that are specialists, and so the people who are the experimental physicists versus the theoretical physicists. And yes, I'm arguing that the fact is you want to find somebody who seems professional and unbiased and wishes to do the engineering for a proper experiment and all that crap. So let's say that at least I have that. I mean, I'm not going to try to force anything to happen. I just wanted, the experiment to be as complete as possible in terms of covering all the basics, like understanding friction and air drag and all the stuff that's going to screw up the experiment. And what I can and can't do to compensate for those irritating influences that'll screw things up. Like I said, when you even think about all the time they've spent on that space station and they don't do any of these experiments, it's just kind of funny, just because it's such a great environment for doing them. I mean, they're still in an oxygen environment, don't get me wrong, so that's, they still have air drag. But they certainly got rid of the gravity headache, creating more friction. Yeah, so there's only a handful of people interested solely chasing, verifying truth out there. Yes, no, look, the whole argument, you're making this argument that so you say here at the end, and would probably need to get them invested personally by building rapport and other psychological bullshit. Yeah, that means you have to be some sort of, I should set a trap. I should set a trap for AB Science. I should go on his channel, type a bunch of "I love you" comments, and "Oh, you're so great, you're so brilliant, you're so this." Maybe even give him some, donate some money, just to play it up until I can get him to some point where I can spring the trap, and say, "Ha ha, no, I think you're an idiot, and you're a pompous douchebag, and blah, 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 now I'm going to prove it." No, I'm really not going to do that. I mean, yes, it might be expedient. It might actually get me where I want to go, but I won't drive that shitty truck, okay? I just won't do it. I'm not going to live my life making obvious, there's plenty of stuff you compromise your principles enough in life. I mean, when they're obvious compromise, when you're obviously cheating, fuck that, So, all I've tried to attempt to argue to you is this isn't as simple as you think it is, okay? You just don't poof experiments. And the very fact is that if you look at what's wrong, it's the very fact that they did just poof them. That they think, they're complete. Veritasium did a single photon experiment. Well, if you look at the details, no, he didn't. He failed to do one. Okay, because he had to break the experiment so dramatically to make it do something like what he wanted the outcome to be. He expected it to be. A clear force. And that's all over the place. Because what sells is woo. People don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear that the universe is duller and dimmer and stupider than, they hope. That there isn't some redeeming, sparkling unicorn glitter after all. They don't want to know that the universe is this clunky, stupid, mechanical system that's only made out of 4 parts. They don't want it to be checkers. They want it to be chess. They want to believe that I'm playing chess and I'm smart and I'm blah, blah, blah. And they don't want to know, no, you were playing checkers the whole time. It was actually tic-tac-toe. It was really that stupid. So you're in a very stupid universe with very stupid rules. They don't want to hear that. So the people who can, the pseudo-scientists, the fringe, okay, the ones that sell are the ones selling the UFO theories, selling the woo theories, selling the, God-bothering theories, because people don't want to hear the truth. There's no, they can't, what's in it for me? There's no what's in it for me in the truth. The truth has nothing in it for you. It will not ever put a smile on your face. I mean, every real, you know, if you really get to it, you know, every true statement is going to be, you know, just another kick in the ass. It's going to be another kick in the balls. You're just going to take a hit, because the truth is it's all made out of shit. You know, all your accomplishments are shit. It's all shit. You know, but anyway, so that's the real problem here. Is I'm not selling what people want, and that's the simple truth. And if I was, then I could generate a bigger audience, and then they'd have to come debunk me, because I would be a significant player, because I had a group of crazy fucks following me. I mean, it is ironic that they'll go debunk flat earthers and other pseudoscientists who are obvious, you know, and pseudo-religion, you know, the fake religion stuff, the debunking of the religious frauds, you know, the miracle claimers and all that stuff. They'll go after all those people. Why? Because they have a group of crazy fucks following them. And somehow they think that audience that was dumb enough to fall for that shit is an audience worth reclamating. Like there's something, ooh, we got to save those retards from being retarded. No, they're retards. That's why they're in the retard audience in the first place. That's why they're watching that crap in the first place, is they're really fucking stupid. And you're not going to fix their stupidity by, you know, pointing out that their bus driver's an asshole, because they'll just put another asshole in the seat. They don't have the discretion to be able not to do it all over again. They'll just keep doing it. And sort of the evidence is you can see it, right? I mean, the die-hard Trump supporter, the die-hard religious kooks, right? The religious kooks steal their money, do all kinds of crap, and the audience couldn't care less. You know, debunk him. So what? You know, he'll be still making his, you know, $1 million a year next year. He'll just say, I'm sorry, I sinned, and cry. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't change anything, because the audience isn't retarded. So, I mean, it's a shitty dilemma. But the simple subject was, am I the best candidate to do the physical experiments? And again, I pointed out to you, I have no space, I have no tools, and I have a lot of other shit to do. And so those are 3 really good reasons why I shouldn't be the guy doing it, because somebody else can do it in 1/100th of the time it's going to take me to manufacture it. And it's just the truth. And it's not like it's just a few people out there. There's lots of them. And the fact is, we should be able to get somebody who has the equipment to do the experiment. We should be able to get somebody with an air track to do these experiments. We shouldn't have to even create our own, you know, systems to do them and all this kind of crap. But that can't happen until there's enough of you support people in the audience. And again, I can't attract an audience because the world is made out of retards. It's not made out of smart people who give a shit about the truth. It's made out of silly people who follow crap, you know, who just eat crap, you know, just you know, feed on the, you know, vomit of shysters and propagandists and cult members. I mean, frankly, science could be called a cult. You know, they have their dogma, they have their revered concepts like kinetic energy, their magic concepts, you know, for which they have no evidence. You know, they believe without good reason. It's that simple. There's no good reason to believe, you know, light is bent twice as much in gravity, because there really isn't any good reason. There's not any good experimental evidence. But people believe it, and they believe it emphatically. And that's the problem. And you ain't going to fix that by me doing a couple of experiments, frankly. It's not going to fix the problem. So anyway, it is dismal. So somebody else left a link to a Google lawsuits. You know, so far all these, you know, unfortunately, state lawyers don't know how to make an argument in court. I mean, they're just so bad. And so, you know, so many of these lawsuits, you know, that are state organized suck. Because they really don't know how to get to the core. I mean, where Google is violating the law is the DMCA. They've ripped it to shreds, essentially. And that's the one you can really get them on. and that's the one I'll include if I have to do this whole suing thing. That's the one I'm going to sue them for, and I'll be suing them also for the fact that their search engine results are not a reflection of the internet. They're a reflection of Google's incentives. You know, their advertising revenue is dependent on them shoving certain results onto that first page. Very important to their revenue stream. And that corruption has a real consequence in terms of how they've structured and engineered the search engine. They shouldn't be allowed to advertise that you are searching the internet, because you're not searching the internet. You're searching Google's database, which highly biases results. Highly biases them. Some results will never show up on the first page. Just a fact. No matter how. No matter how close you make the, like I said, I mean, you have to literally quote text off my website for my website to come up on any of these physics subjects. You have to take actual physical and put it in quotation marks. There's no other way to make the words create a link in Google. It just doesn't exist as a relevant source in any way whatsoever on the internet, unless you already know what's on the website. Unless you can already quote it, you'll never find it. And that's not how the internet should work. Alright, anyway. Yeah, till the next time. I mean, all this stuff could be fixed so easily, right? I mean, even, you know, sitting here functioning inside, you know, these accounts, it should, when they give you this screen name, they should be telling you exactly how old is this account, you know, and how many comments has it made. You know, this kind of information should be right there. You know, we should see it. And I should have the prerogative to say on my channel, 1 day old accounts, I don't want to hear what you have to say. You know, basically, fuck you. Okay, if you don't have a YouTube account already, okay, and you don't have one that's, you know, you really use, fuck you. I don't care what you have to say. This is your first YouTube video you ever watched? Well, go watch another one. Go do something else for a while and come back when you've done it a bit. Okay, because, yeah, they're very unreliable. These. Well, anyway, it's be a simple way to filter out some of this socky crap. You know, some of these trolly shit. We get rid of it by just saying, yeah, fuck that. But anyway, so much of it is so broken. Doesn't need to be broken. It's broken on purpose. It's configured this way for deliberate reasons that are to the advantage of the Google Corporation. It's not for us. It's not for the community. It's not for the viewers. It's not for the producers. It's for the Google. And again, that's an argument people just don't want to hear. Google's our friend. No. It really is the worst enemy of free speech and progress in anything else. It's completely a big fat propaganda money-making engine for the desires of a couple of twats, you know. Not even real Americans, you know, immigrants. Oh, the lovely immigrants and what they do for us. Yeah, you know, as soon as they get a taste of a dollar bill, you know, they just become whores. Oof. Anyway. Oh, I hate speech. Oh, no, I hate speech. Oh. No, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. Tell me to requalify it. No. Immigrants are lovely. They're like little flowers. It's perfect. Anyway, poison ivy flowers. Anyway, it's just so bad. The world has just gotten so ludicrous. It's just too ludicrous. Fuck this planet. Anyway, I guess that's hate speech too. Fuck it. Just no hope. Just. Oh, this is so bad. So bad. anyway, yeah, I think that's enough. Let's get the hell out of here. So, till the next time and such, this has been a DraftScience video presentation. Yeah, I mean, it's just, is there enough, how many brain cells per inch of brain cell, I mean, per inch of brain on planet Earth are really doing anything? How many neurons are actually doing something smart? That'd be a good question on planet Earth.